Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Elaine Matthews, and 5 months ago, I won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. You've probably seen that viral video. Yes, the one where I'm literally washing dishes in my uncle's kitchen when I received the news live on TV. What you don't know is that just 2 hours earlier, I had been relegated to the staff table during the grand annual Matthews family dinner, while my uncle, the renowned Harvard professor, presided over the main table, dismissing my work as second-tier science. That moment in the kitchen changed everything. The Nobel Committee's live broadcast interrupted the program on the small kitchen TV, and suddenly, everyone in the house heard my name being announced for her revolutionary research in molecular catalysts that fundamentally transform our approach to clean energy. This is the story of how I went from the niece who wastes her time in a second-rate lab to a scientist whose research might help save our planet, and how I discovered that sometimes true family isn't defined by blood, but by who actually believes in you. The sweetest moment? It wasn't even winning the prize. It was seeing the expression on my uncle's face when he realized the person he had sent to wash the dishes had just made scientific history in front of millions of viewers. Growing up in the Matthews family meant living in the shadow of academic excellence. My father, the younger brother of Dr. Robert Matthews, never pursued higher education, choosing instead to run a small bookstore in our Massachusetts town. This decision made him the family disappointment, a status that unfortunately extended to me by association. Family gatherings at my uncle's sprawling Cambridge home were exercises in subtle humiliation. My Uncle Robert was the family star, tenured at Harvard by 35, department chair by 45, and author of widely cited papers in organic chemistry. His home office walls were adorned with awards, honorary degrees, and photos with Nobel laureates. The irony wasn't lost on me that he specialized in the same field I would eventually revolutionize. I remember my first academic humiliation clearly. I was 12, proudly bringing my science fair certificate to Thanksgiving dinner. While the other adults congratulated me, Uncle Robert examined it with a condescending smile. Chemistry, interesting choice. Though state science fairs aren't particularly competitive, are they? He then launched into a story about how he had won national recognition at the same age. My father said nothing, just stared at his plate. By high school, I had developed a genuine passion for chemistry, spending hours in our school's modest lab. When I announced at Christmas dinner that I'd been accepted to MIT with a scholarship, Uncle Robert remarked that MIT's undergraduate program is acceptable, though not what it once was. He suggested I'd be better off at a liberal arts college, since women often find the research intensity overwhelming. My cousins, his children, all attended Ivy League schools and were constantly held up as examples of proper academic trajectory. The most devastating incident came during my senior year at MIT. I'd been working on an independent research project involving novel catalyst structures. During the annual Easter gathering, I excitedly mentioned some promising results. Uncle Robert asked detailed questions that initially seemed like genuine interest, only to systematically dismantle my methodology in front of everyone. This is precisely why preliminary research should stay in proper labs, not undergraduate projects, he concluded. That night, in the guest bathroom, I cried silently, wondering if he was right about my abilities. Despite his discouragement, I pursued my PhD at UC Berkeley, a choice Uncle Robert called settling, working under Dr. Lydia Chen, a brilliant but less famous chemist who believed in my ideas about molecular catalysts when others didn't. My family viewed my move to California as running away from the East Coast academic establishment, In reality, I was following my research passion and finally finding my scientific voice away from my uncle's shadow. What no one in my family knew was that for 3 years, Dr. Chen and I had been developing a revolutionary approach to molecular catalysts that could drastically reduce energy consumption in industrial processes. We worked nights, weekends, with minimal funding, facing rejection from several prestigious journals, whose reviewers, some colleagues of my uncle, deemed our approach theoretically unsound. The irony of using methods similar to ones my uncle had dismissed years earlier wasn't lost on me. This research became my secret, not from shame, but from a desire to protect it from premature criticism until we had irrefutable results. The final piece of our research fell into place just 2 weeks before the annual Matthews family gathering, an elegant solution that made our catalysts not only effective, but economically viable for large-scale implementation. Dr. Chen and I submitted our findings to Nature, knowing this could change everything, though neither of us imagined just how dramatically or how soon. The annual Matthews family gathering always coincided with Uncle Robert's birthday in October, a convenient excuse for what was essentially a celebration of his achievements. This year was his 60th, and the event was more elaborate than usual. My father called to ensure I would attend, his voice carrying that familiar mixture of obligation and apology. "Your uncle specifically asked if you'd be there," he added, though we both knew this wasn't necessarily a good sign. I flew from Berkeley to Boston with a strange sense of anticipation. Our paper had been fast-tracked through peer review, unprecedented in our field, and the responses were overwhelmingly positive. Still, only Dr. Chen knew the full significance of what we'd accomplished. Part of me fantasized about finally earning my uncle's respect, while the rational scientist in me knew better. The day of the gathering dawned crisp and bright, classic New England autumn. Uncle Robert's house looked exactly as it always had, imposing, perfectly maintained, with the Harvard flag flying alongside the American one. My cousins' cars, all luxury models, lined the circular driveway. I parked my rental behind the catering van, already feeling like an outsider. Inside, the hierarchy was immediately apparent. My cousins, all in finance, law, or medicine, clustered around Uncle Robert in the main living room. My Aunt Margaret orchestrated the event with military precision, directing caterers while greeting guests with practiced warmth. I spotted my father near the bookshelves, engaged in uncomfortable conversation with academic colleagues of my uncle. "Elaine, you made it," Uncle Robert announced when he saw me, as though he'd been betting against my appearance. "Still at Berkeley, aren't you? Any breakthroughs in that little lab of yours?" His tone made it clear he expected nothing of consequence. "Actually, we've had some promising results," I said carefully, unwilling to reveal too much. "Wonderful," he replied dismissively. "Perhaps you can tell us about it during dinner. Speaking of which, Margaret has prepared the seating arrangements." Dinner was where the evening took its most humiliating turn. As guests moved toward the formal dining room, I noticed my name wasn't on any of the place cards at the 3 main tables. My aunt intercepted me with an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Elaine, dear, we've had so many of Robert's colleagues join us this year. I hope you don't mind, but we've arranged for you to dine in the kitchen. The caterers have set up a lovely space, and you'll be more comfortable there. Some of the younger staff are quite interesting." The implication was clear. I wasn't deemed important enough to sit with the family or academic guests. I saw my father's face fall when he realized what was happening, but he said nothing, merely giving me a helpless glance before taking his assigned seat, at the furthest table from Uncle Robert's, of course. The kitchen was bustling with caterers and servers. They'd indeed set up a small table in the corner where two young servers and the catering manager sat. They looked up in surprise when I joined them, clearly uncomfortable with having a family member relegated to their table. "I'm Elaine," I said, forcing a smile. "Apparently, I'm dining with you tonight." Maria, the catering manager, was kind enough to engage me in conversation, asking about my work. When I explained my research in simplified terms, she listened with genuine interest, more than my family had ever shown. The irony wasn't lost on me that these strangers showed more respect for my intelligence than my own blood relatives. From the kitchen, we could hear the main dining room erupting in laughter and conversation. Midway through the meal, Uncle Robert's voice carried clearly as he began his traditional speech, highlighting family achievements of the year. My cousin's promotions and publications were announced to applause. My name was conspicuously absent. The final insult came when dessert was served. My aunt appeared in the kitchen, seeming startled to find me in conversation with the staff. "Elaine, would you mind helping with the dishes? We're running behind, and we need to clear before Robert cuts his cake." The caterers looked mortified on my behalf, but I stood up calmly. "Of course, Aunt Margaret." As I began loading the dishwasher with plates that had held food I hadn't been offered, I heard Uncle Robert in the dining room, now discussing his latest research grant, ironically, in the very field of catalytic chemistry where our breakthrough would soon make his work obsolete. I scrubbed expensive china while fighting back tears of frustration, not sadness. A decade of this treatment, and still it stung. Maria quietly turned on the small television mounted under the kitchen cabinet. "To make the work go faster," she said kindly. A science documentary was playing, which seemed fitting. None of us expected what would happen next. The kitchen television suddenly cut from the documentary to a special news bulletin. The announcer's voice was formal. "We interrupt this program for a live broadcast from Stockholm, where the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences is about to announce this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry." I froze, a half-washed plate in my hands. My heart began racing, not with anticipation, our paper had only just been published, but with the painful reminder that this was the pinnacle my uncle had chased his entire career. The staff continued working around me, unaware of my sudden tension. The camera panned to the committee chairman, who began speaking about groundbreaking work in molecular catalysts. I held my breath, recognizing the description of research that sounded remarkably similar to ours. But surely this was impossible. Our paper was too recent. The review process for the Nobel typically took years. And therefore, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry is awarded to Dr. Elaine Matthews and Dr. Lydia Chen for their revolutionary development of energy-efficient molecular catalysts that transform industrial chemical processes. The plate slipped from my hands, shattering on the floor. Maria jumped, then stared at me, then at the television, making the connection. "Wait, did they just—" Before she could finish, my phone exploded with notifications. The first was from Dr. Chen. "Are you watching? They called me last week but made me promise not to tell you. They wanted it to be a surprise." The second notification was a New York Times alert confirming the announcement. Apparently, our work had been secretly reviewed by the committee for months before publication, an extremely rare occurrence prompted by the potential global impact of our discovery. The kitchen door swung open as one of the younger cousins rushed in. "Uncle Robert, they're announcing the Nobel for Chemistry on TV." Then he saw me, standing frozen amidst broken china, and his expression changed to confusion. Voices from the dining room grew louder as guests moved toward the kitchen. Uncle Robert pushed through first, irritated at the interruption of his birthday celebration. "What's all this commotion about?" The television was replaying the announcement, my name and face now displayed prominently on the screen. The room fell silent as realization dawned. Uncle Robert's face underwent a transformation I'll never forget. Shock, disbelief, and then something that looked remarkably like fear. That's not possible, he whispered. Your work you couldn't have. My aunt stood behind him, her perfectly composed facade cracking. My father pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down his face, pride radiating from him for perhaps the first time in my presence. I found my voice at last. The impossible catalyst structure? The one you told me was theoretically unsound at Easter dinner 4 years ago? Turns out it works. Not just works, it revolutionizes the entire field. My voice grew stronger. The approach you dismissed as amateur just won the Nobel Prize. Uncle Robert's colleagues were staring at him now, some whispering among themselves. I realized several were editors who had rejected our early papers, likely on my uncle's recommendation. "Why didn't you tell us you were being considered?" my aunt asked, trying to salvage the situation. "We would have celebrated you properly." "Would you?" I asked quietly. "The same way you celebrated me tonight? By seating me with the staff and asking me to wash dishes during a family celebration?" The silence was deafening. My phone rang, Swedish area code. With trembling hands, I answered and put it on speaker. "Dr. Matthews, this is the Royal Swedish Academy. We're live on air now and would love to have your initial reaction to receiving the Nobel Prize." I looked directly at my uncle as I spoke. "I'm absolutely honored and somewhat in shock. This recognition validates years of work that many established scientists dismissed as impossible. Dr. Chen and I persevered because we believed in our research when others didn't. Sometimes the most revolutionary ideas come from unexpected places and people." When I ended the call, the kitchen remained silent. Then Maria, the catering manager, began to applaud. The other staff joined in, followed by my father, then my uncle's colleagues, and finally, reluctantly, my cousins. Only Uncle Robert and Aunt Margaret remained frozen. I picked up my purse. "I should go. I have a flight to Stockholm to arrange." I turned to Maria and the staff. "Thank you for your kindness tonight. It meant more than you know." As I walked out through the dining room, past the elaborate place settings and my uncle's birthday cake, guests parted like the Red Sea. My father caught up with me at the door. "Elaine," he said, his voice breaking, "I've never been more proud." I hugged him tightly. "Come to Stockholm with me, Dad." As we left, I could hear the commotion resuming behind us. My uncle's carefully orchestrated birthday celebration transformed into chaos by an announcement from Sweden that no one, least of all me, had seen coming. The 48 hours following the announcement passed in a blur. My phone never stopped ringing. Journalists, university presidents, even the White House. Dr. Chen and I were whisked onto morning shows and news programs, our faces suddenly recognized everywhere. Through it all, I kept thinking about the expressions on my family's faces in that kitchen moment, especially Uncle Robert's. 3 days after the announcement, I was packing for Stockholm when my father called. "Your uncle wants to meet with you," he said cautiously. "He's not doing well." Part of me wanted to refuse, to savor the validation without giving him a chance to diminish it. But curiosity won out. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near my hotel, neutral territory. Uncle Robert looked diminished when he arrived, his usual commanding presence replaced by something almost fragile. He'd aged years in days. "Congratulations," he said stiffly after ordering coffee. "The committee made a worthy selection." "Thank you," I replied, waiting for what would come next. He struggled visibly before continuing. "I've been reviewing your paper. It's exceptional work, truly groundbreaking." The admission seemed physically painful for him. What I don't understand, he added, is why you never told me what you were working on. I could have helped, provided resources, guidance. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. The last time I shared my research ideas with you, you dismantled them in front of the entire family. You've spent years making it clear you thought my work was second-rate, my career choices disappointing. Why would I have exposed something I cared about deeply to that kind of criticism? He flinched. I was hard on you because I saw potential. Excellence requires pushing, demanding more. No, I interrupted firmly. What you did wasn't mentorship. It was belittlement. And it wasn't just about science. You treated my father the same way his entire life for choosing a path different from yours. Silence fell between us. Finally, he spoke again, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Several of my colleagues were on the Nobel Committee. They told me something I'm still processing. They said they've been following your work for years, that you're considered more innovative than I ever was. The admission clearly cost him dearly. In that moment, I saw beyond the arrogant academic to the insecure man beneath, someone who had defined himself by professional recognition, now forced to confront that his dismissed niece had achieved what he never would. "I'm sorry about the dinner," he said suddenly. "Margaret arranged the seating, but I knew. I allowed it. It was unforgivable." It was, I agreed, but it wasn't surprising. It was just the culmination of a pattern that's existed my whole life. The conversation left me emotionally drained, but oddly liberated. I realized I no longer needed his approval or validation. The wounds were too deep for instant healing, but acknowledging the truth was a necessary first step. The next day brought another unexpected visitor to my hotel, Maria, the catering manager from the disastrous dinner. "I hope you don't mind me tracking you down," she said nervously. "I just wanted to congratulate you properly and to tell you something I thought you should know." She explained that after I left, chaos had indeed erupted. Several of Uncle Robert's colleagues had cornered him, demanding to know why he had never mentioned his niece's groundbreaking work. One had explicitly asked if he had been the anonymous reviewer who had initially rejected our paper in the Journal of Chemical Innovation, a rejection that had delayed our research by nearly a year. He didn't answer, but his face said everything, Maria told me. Your aunt had a complete meltdown, screaming about family loyalty. It was intense. I felt a strange combination of vindication and sadness. Thank you for telling me, and thank you for your kindness that night. It meant a lot when you turned on that TV. She smiled. My daughter wants to be a scientist. Watching what happened to you, I want her to know that sometimes the people who get ignored end up changing the world. The Nobel ceremony in Stockholm was surreal. Dr. Chen and I stood together on that historic stage, accepting an honor neither of us had dared to imagine. My father sat in the front row, tears streaming down his face. Several rows back sat Uncle Robert and Aunt Margaret. They had reached out through my father, asking to attend. Their presence was uncomfortable, but somehow right, a necessary closing of a circle. In my acceptance speech, I spoke about persistence and unlikely paths to discovery. Innovation often comes from unexpected sources, I said. Sometimes the questions that change science aren't asked by those at the center, but by those working at the margins, looking in from different perspectives. The aftermath transformed my career and life in ways I couldn't have predicted. Berkeley created a research center around our work. Funding poured in. Dr. Chen and I found ourselves with resources we'd only dreamed of previously. More surprisingly, my relationship with my extended family began a slow, complicated evolution. My cousins reached out one by one, with varying degrees of sincerity. Some connections were salvageable, others weren't. My father experienced a remarkable renaissance, standing taller, speaking more confidently at family gatherings that were now fundamentally altered in their power dynamics. Uncle Robert and I developed a strained but civil relationship. During a Christmas gathering 6 months after Stockholm, held at my father's bookstore rather than my uncle's mansion, a significant shift in family tradition. He pulled me aside and handed me a small package. Inside was a framed copy of my first rejected paper submission, the one he had almost certainly helped quash years earlier. Across it, he had written simply, "I was wrong. Science is better because I was." It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. Some wounds don't heal completely. But it was acknowledgement, and for now, that was enough. The most unexpected outcome came 3 months after the Nobel announcement. Our catalyst technology was implemented in a major industrial plant, reducing energy consumption by 78% and cutting carbon emissions dramatically. Watching the news coverage of this real-world application, I realized that the validation from my family, something I had craved for decades, paled in comparison to the actual impact of our work. The true triumph wasn't the medal or the recognition. It was seeing our science change the world, one molecule at a time. Looking back now, I sometimes still can't believe the journey from that kitchen to the Nobel stage. The little girl who cried after family dinners is now heading a global research initiative that's changing how we approach chemical manufacturing worldwide. Our catalyst technology has been adopted by 12 major corporations and reduced carbon emissions equivalent to taking 8 million cars off the road. But this story isn't really about scientific achievement or even family drama. It's about believing in your work when no one else does. It's about finding your true supporters, like Dr. Paley, Chen, who saw potential where others saw impossibility, or Maria, who showed more respect in a kitchen conversation than my own family had in decades. I still get messages from young scientists, especially women, who watched that viral video of the Nobel announcement interrupting my dishwashing duty. They tell me it gives them courage to continue when their ideas are dismissed or when they're made to feel small in spaces where they should be valued. If you're watching this and feeling underestimated or relegated to the metaphorical kitchen in your field, remember, revolutionary ideas rarely come from comfortable places. They emerge from persistence, from questioning established wisdom, and sometimes from proving the skeptics wrong. Don't wait for validation from those who've underestimated you. Find your Dr. Chen, someone who believes in your vision. Build your work so solidly that even those who dismissed you can't deny its value. And when your moment comes, whether it's a Nobel Prize or any other triumph, remember that the greatest victory isn't proving others wrong, but proving yourself right. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more content about breaking barriers in science and beyond. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when they seat you with the staff is to change the world while they're not looking.